Hi friends, I'm Ashley and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be another reading vlog. And so in today's video I'm going to be reading two recently released 2025 YA fantasies. And both of these I'm really excited for. So the first one is The Notorious Virtues by Alwyn Hamilton. So this one just came out in April and it's the first book in a duology. And I've been excited to read this one since I did my April releases video. And I haven't really heard anyone talk about this one yet, so I'm excited to see what I'm going to think of it. And the second book I want to read in this video is The Rose Bargain by Sasha Peyton Smith. And this one is also a duology, but unlike this one, I have heard many people talk about this one, and it seems like a lot of people love this one, so I'm really excited to get into this one as well. Also in this one, when I first opened it, I saw this and I was like, that's so pretty. And then something else these books have in common is that they both feature competitions. So in this one, our main character is competing to become the heir of her family, and in this one, our main character is competing for the hand of the fairy prince. So I am going to start with The Notorious Virtues first, so without further ado, I'm just going to go hop right into reading this. So at the beginning of the book, there is this little family tree. There's a name theme going on here because we start with someone named Mercy, and then their children are Prosper, Grace, Verity, Patience, Valor. And then some of those people's children are Constant, Clemency, Honora, Nora, who is one of our main characters in here, and Modesty. So they're like all virtues, which is very interesting. And I guess, I just put 1 and 2 together. This is called The Notorious Virtues, so maybe the title has something to do with the names of the people, or like what the family stands for. Okay, there's a prologue, and it's called The Charmed City, and it just like the writing. I already like the writing. If the writing in the book is like the writing in the prologue, I feel like I'm really gonna like this author's writing style. It seems like very whimsical and a little bit lyrical. The first sentence of the prologue is, "It was known as the enchanted hour." And another line in the prologue that I really like is, "Yesterday was forgotten, but it wasn't quite today." So you start off the prologue with a really whimsical feeling, but then a little more than halfway down the page, things go kind of dark because it says, "But the undying things in the woods never slept. They watched." Like, what is that about? Like, are we gonna have some horror in this fantasy book? I'm very intrigued, even more. I was already intrigued by the description of this book, but now I'm like even more intrigued by this prologue. Ooh, the book is starting on the first day of spring. So not too far from the actual season, but we're like more at the end of spring now and going towards summer. Hi, so it is now Thursday, May 15th, and I am here for reading check-ins. So this book, I have not been able to put this book down. I have been devouring this book this week. So I am on page 328, chapter 44. And I could have easily finished this morning, but I wanted to give a reading update before I finished it. And today is my first day off this week, so I've been reading this either before work or after work or on lunch break. Like whenever I've had time to pick this book up this week, I have done that. In my work schedule this week, my hours have been all over the place, so I've been pretty tired this week, but even though I've been like really tired, I've still felt the urge to pick this up and just continue reading, and so that's what I've been doing. So this book, I was already intrigued by the premise going into it, as I had talked about it in my April releases video, but when going into a new book, like, I try to keep my expectations low, because sometimes, even if the premise sounds really interesting, sometimes the book just doesn't quite live up to it. But so far, this book has lived up to the premise and then some. And one example is that when reading the inside flap, it seemed like we were going to have dual perspectives. So we were going to have two female characters, Nora and Lottie. But upon starting this book, I realized that there are actually 4 different perspectives that we follow. So we have perspectives from our 2 main female characters, Nora and Lottie, but we also have perspectives from 2 male characters, Theo and August. And I've just been finding like all 4 of their perspectives all very interesting and all very intriguing and fascinating to read about. So before I go any further into my thoughts, let me first tell you a little bit more about the story and what this is about. So first main character we are introduced to is 16-year-old Honora Holtzwald, or Nora as she is called by family and friends. And so Nora's family, they are the rulers of the land. They control all the power and all the magic, because in this world there is magic, and people being able to use magic started with her family's bloodline. And so Nora's grandmother is the current ruler of their country, and Nora's mother was named her heiress. And so Nora, being the only child of her mother, she would eventually have become the heiress. But 7 days before this story starts, her mother is murdered in an alley. And it is said that her murder was a mugging gone wrong. And now because Nora's mother was murdered, Nora is no longer guaranteed to be the heiress. And so now her grandmother has to name a new heir, and in order to determine that new heir, there's going to be a magical competition. And so now Nora must face off against her 3 other cousins who are all teenage girls. And around the same time when the competition is beginning, Nora ends up seeing a picture of her mother that was taken right after her death, and she sees that her mother is still wearing all her jewelry. And so Nora begins to think that it wasn't really a mugging, that the mugging was really just a cover-up story for what actually happened to her mother. And so she starts an investigation to figure out the truth behind her mother's death. And so she ends up approaching the reporter who took that photograph, and he is one of our main male characters, and his name is August. And August is trying to make it as a news reporter, and he works for a newspaper that is known to publish all the bad articles about Nora's family. They're always digging up dirt on her family, and a lot of the people that work there don't like Nora's family. And his newspaper publishes these letters from the leader of this rebel group who is trying to overthrow Nora's family because they think everyone should have an equal share of magic and power. And while August doesn't like what Nora's family stands for and thinks that things need to change, he doesn't hate her family as much as the extremists do. And so she comes to him and asks him for his help in trying to discover the truth behind her mother's death. So he agrees because he sees this as an opportunity to move up in his career. And so those are 2 of our main characters. And then in chapter 2, we are introduced to our other main female character, Lottie. And she has spent all her life in a convent with sisters who always tell her she's a bad girl and that she's full of vice. And they are constantly locking her away in this briar pit. And it's exactly how it sounds. It's a dark, cold pit that is filled with briars. And the sisters are constantly locking her in here as punishment for being bad. And Lottie is able to read minds. And again, the sisters say that that ability of hers is a sign of evil, and they tell her to never use it. And so unlike Nora, who was born into a family of wealth and who has always had everything that she wanted, Lottie has really had nothing. And she just really, at her core, she wants to find a place where she belongs and a family that loves her. And so at the beginning of the book, when these 2 men come looking for her, saying that her mother sent them to find her, she gets a little hopeful that maybe finally she is going to get the family that she always wanted. She ends up learning that she is actually a member of Nora's family, and so she's the daughter of Nora's aunt Grace, And for whatever reason, her whole existence was kept secret from Nora and the rest of the cousins. However, on her way to her mother, her journey ends up being interrupted by mechanical wolves that descend upon her and the two men that are with her. And one of the men ends up dying, and he was a family lawyer. And so only she and the other man, who is a guard to the family, ends up surviving. And so they finally make it to her mother, only for Lottie to learn that her mother retrieved her because she wants Lottie to participate in a magical competition that will determine the heir of the family. And so Lottie quickly comes to realize that her mother did not find her out of the goodness of her heart. But Lottie is just so desperate for a place to finally belong in a family of her own that she decides that she's going to do whatever it takes to win this child, because she thinks that that's the way that she will earn her mother's love and attention. Those are 3 of our 4 main characters. So our 4th main character is Theo, and he is a knight. Theo comes from a family that their bloodline is sworn to protect Nora's family. And they are magically bound to Nora's family, and they can literally not defy any orders that they get from the head of the family. And so all his life, Theo has been raised to protect Nora's family at all costs. It has been drilled into him. And he had an older brother who was pretty much a prodigy and was one of the best knights of their generation. His brother was the knight of Nora's mother, but when Nora's mother is killed, it's assumed he is killed as well, but his body was never found. But Theo thinks that he has to be dead because it was his duty to protect Nora's mom, and his brother would never forsake his duty. And so Theo grew up alongside Nora. So Theo has seen all sides of Nora. He knows like the true her as opposed to what she shows the press and the public. And so he is often her guard, and so their lives have always been intertwined. But when Lottie ends up entering the picture, he also ends up protecting her, and he seems to be drawn to her too. And so Theo ends up protecting Lottie and ensuring that she arrives in time in order to participate in the competition to determine the next heir. And so the competition begins. And our story goes from there. So now for my thoughts. As I mentioned in the beginning of this update, I just cannot put this book down. How I feel about this book, I think, is best summed up by Samantha Shannon's little blurb on the back of the book. So she says, "The Notorious Virtues is a sparkling cocktail of fairy tales, family conflicts, mysteries, and magic, bubbling with rebellion and vibrant characters. Beneath the intoxicating glamour of Walstead, you'll find a dark fable about power, the importance of storytelling, and our primal fear of what lies in the woods." And that blurb right there pretty much describes everything that I have found fascinating about this book. Like, there's just so much going on in this and so much in this book to unpack. First, let's talk a little bit about the fairy tale element, which I am really enjoying. So Nora's whole family, her history revolves around a descendant who was a woodcutter, and his story unfolds little by little throughout the book. You get little excerpts of his story that read like a fairy tale. So after chapter 2, the next thing you get is the first part of the story of this ancestor, and it's called The Tale of the Woodcutter and his wife. But as you read more, you also get more excerpts from the woodcutter story, and you get to see how the first trials ended up unfolding. And so I'm finding the whole fairy tale aspect of this to be very fascinating, and then also the competition aspect to be very interesting as well. So far there have been 3 trials, and there is only 1 trial left to go. So things are getting super exciting, although they've already been super exciting from like the first page of this book. And along with like the competition is a lot of family drama going on that has been very entertaining to read. Other thing of this book that has been very interesting is the magic system. So everyone in Nora's family has a lot of magic in their blood, but the normal person isn't born with a bunch of magic, and usually in order to perform magic you need like some sort of charm. But there are a few people who can perform magic without charms, and one of them is Nora, and sometimes the members of her family are born with extra gifts. So Nora can scry, and then one of her cousins can implant thoughts into your mind. And then Lottie herself is a mind reader, which is very intriguing because there hasn't been a mind reader in the family in 100 years. And then one other thing I want to talk about that is also making me not want to put down this book is the plot and everything that is going on. So there's a lot going on in this book. So you have the plot of the competition of determining the next heir of the family. You have the plot of Nora trying to figure out the truth behind her mother's death. And then you also have the plot of Lottie trying to figure out who her father is. And also add to that, in the background, you have a rebellion going on by the people who are tired of Nora's family being in control. And you also have the mystery of exactly who the leader of this rebellion is. And so just like combining that all together is just making me flip these pages so fast to find out exactly what is going on. So yeah, those are my thoughts on this so far. And yeah, I feel like I just rambled on a little bit and I'm not sure if my explanation did justice to just like how much I am enjoying this book, but just know that I am so enjoying this and I can't put this down. And on that note, I am gonna go finish this book because I need to know how everything is going to end up. We're getting some heartwarming moments in this story finally. So page 380, it says, and in Lottie it echoed, "This is what belonging to someone is supposed to feel like." My heart. That is how it ends. Hi, so I finished reading this and I loved this so much. I am giving this 5 stars. The last book I read before this was also YA Fantasy and I also gave it 5 stars. And that was this right here, The Floating World. But these two are such different books. They have such different tones to them. Like this one is very much a warm-hearted fantasy and I love my warm-hearted fantasy books so much. Whereas this one, definitely not a warm-hearted fantasy, definitely more brutal. This is the type of book that will make you feel all warm and fuzzy and leave you with a smile on your face. This is the type of book that will make your heart race and your adrenaline pump and just make you keep flipping the pages to know what's gonna happen next. And that being said, there were, though, near the end of this, there were a few wholesome moments between Nora and Lottie that made my heart happy. And also in like the last 150 pages, really got to see Nora and Lottie develop as characters and they finally stopped letting people dictate like who they should be and how they should act. And they decide to make those decisions for themselves. Finally start to discover their true selves. And also we got some plot revelations towards the end. And some of the plot revelations are just crazy. And the way this book ended, so this is the first book in a duology, so the way this book ended, I need the next book like right now. Like I am 100% invested in these characters and this story and I just need to know what's gonna happen next and what's gonna happen to our characters. And in case you're wondering, there is like a small hint of romance in here, but this on a whole is definitely a fantasy with just like a tiny dash of romance. And also, I did want to mention the trials in here. So while one of the plots of the book is these trials that the girls have to undergo to see who will become the next heiress, trials are just like a very small part of the book. Like, there's a lot of other things going on. So if you're going into this expecting a big focus on the trials like the Hunger Games, then you will be disappointed. And all the scenes with the trials in here are kind of brief. Some are a little longer than others, but in my opinion, the length of them really suits the story and everything else that's going on, and I don't think they needed anything added to them. And also, as Nora says, the trials come to her. She doesn't go to the trials. So in this book, no one knows like when the trials are going to happen, where they're going to happen. Pretty much they just happen randomly, and the trials don't care if the girls are doing something else at the time. They just happen. And the trials themselves feel very fairy tale like, and that is very appropriate because the person who is giving these trials is a immortal being from a fairy tale. So that's all my thoughts on this book. Definitely recommend if anything of what I said about it intrigues you. So next I am going to start The Rose Bargain, which now I'm kind of a little nervous about reading it because I love this one so much. So I'm like, is this one also going to be just as good, or am I going to be let down after reading this one, which was amazing? And I started with this one first because I hadn't really heard anyone say anything about it. And this one I have heard people talk about and love it. But now I'm like, maybe I should have started with this one. But I guess the only way to find out is to start it. Hi, so it's now Sunday, May 18th, and I'm here for reading update on The Rose Bargain. So I am happy to say that I am very much enjoying this so far. Like the Notorious Virtues, like I didn't want to put this book down. I had to make myself put this book down and come do an update while still reading it. So I am currently on page 199, chapter 21. So let me tell you a little bit about what this is about, and then I will share more of my thoughts. So this book has a prologue of sorts that starts in the year 1471 with the War of the Roses. And so King Edward ends up making a deal with the Fairy Queens to help him win the war. And he makes the deal, he becomes king, but he's only king for 24 hours before he mysteriously dies. And the Queen of the Fairies has been the Queen of England ever since. Then chapter 1, we fast forward to the year 1848, and we are introduced to our main character, Ivy. So in chapter 1, we learn that Ivy's older sister, Lydia, has been missing for 8 days, and so Ivy is outside at nighttime when she isn't supposed to be, trying to find her sister. But she is unsuccessful in finding her, so she returns home, but not soon long after her getting home, her sister reappears. And her sister has no memory of where she has been the last 8 days. And so after that happening, the book fast forwards 2 months, and Ivy is getting ready to come out into society. And so when the girls of the upper class come out into society, they get to meet with the Fairy Queen, and they get the chance to make a bargain with her. And in this world, every citizen of England gets a chance to make a bargain with the Fairy Queen, but they always come with a price. For example, Ivy's mother made the bargain for a perfect memory, and in exchange, she gave up her left pinky finger. And another example is her father bargained for a plot of land, and in exchange, he gave up his childhood memories. So on the surface, these seem like they're good deals, but the book hints that they might not have been. For example, Ivy's mother's memory is perfect, but it's like almost too perfect. Like, she remembers every little detail, and that kind of stresses her out and overwhelms her at times. And Ivy's father, he learns that the land he bargained for had been overworked and is as such is barren. And since he doesn't have his childhood memories anymore, he can't go to his friends for advice. And then on top of all that, Ivy's sister, Lydia, made a deal with the Fairy Queen, but she doesn't remember what it was, but Ivy just knows that ever since she made that deal, her sister has never been the same. And her family is now on the brink of ruin because of the whole scandal with her sister disappearing. And so now it's up to Ivy to make a good bargain with the Fairy Queen and to find a really good husband to save her family from ruin. Ivy believes that even if she can get like a good bargain for a quality that will make her a good wife, that none of the suitors are going to be interested in her anyways because of the scandal of her sister's disappearance. However, when Ivy goes to see the queen to make her bargain, the queen ends up revealing something that could change everything. The queen reveals that this year she will be holding a competition to find the perfect wife for her son Bram. So Ivy sees this as an opportunity to save her family from ruin, but the queen then goes on to reveal that there is a condition. Condition is if you enter the competition and you are one of the losers, then you can never take another spouse, and you have to spend the rest of your days alone and die as a spinster. And so at first everyone is like appalled by that. And so that condition is our first glance into just how cruel and vicious this Fairy Queen is, because why make that a condition unless you get pleasure from seeing people suffer? She says that she also holds her own suitors to that same condition as well, but again, like, why? Like, why? That's completely unnecessary and just terrible. But anyways, Ivy does decide to enter the competition because she sees this as a chance of actually getting a husband, because otherwise she doesn't believe that anyone is going to ask for her hand. So there are less than 100 girls coming out this year, and 24 of them end up entering this competition. So 24 girls sign up for this competition. And then after they sign contracts, the queen takes them outside to where there are a bunch of people watching, and there is a maypole. She tells them, okay guys, we are now going to whittle the 24 of you down to 6. And those are going to be the 6 that will have a chance at being chosen by the prince. So the 24 of them have to dance around the maypole until there's only 6 of them left standing. And so Ivy does end up being one of the 6 left standing. And so now she is officially a part of this competition. And not long after her entering this competition, she is approached by the prince's younger brother, Emmett. And now Emmett, he is a human, so he is the son of the queen's current mortal husband. So him and Prince Bram are not related by blood at all, but the queen has adopted him. And now Emmett, he hates the Fairy Queen. He has his reasons for hating her. And at this point, Ivy also hates the Fairy Queen and blames her for what happened to her sister. And Emmett says that he will help Ivy win the competition because he believes that by her winning the competition will invalidate the deal that the Fairy Queen made with King Edward all those years ago, and then they'll be able to knock the Fairy Queen off the throne. So the two of them form a sort of alliance, and our story goes from there. So now for my thoughts. So I've just been having so much fun with this book. This book is just so fun to read and also reads really fast. And it's filled with so much drama that just keeps me turning the pages. And a lot of that drama is due to the Fairy Queen because she is just the most evil and vicious being ever. Like, I also hate her at this point in the book. But her, like, antics keep my eyes, like, glued to the pages because I'm like, oh my god, what horrible new thing is she gonna put these girls through? And in contrast to her, you have her son Bram, who just seems like he's a really good person, and he almost seems like too good to be true, and that kind of makes me a little suspicious. But then you have Emmett, his brother, who has told Ivy that Bram is really just actually a really good person. And you learn from Emmett that Bram stuck up for Emmett when he is being bullied. So I'm like, maybe he is just a really good person? But there's also something that recently happened with how a certain character reacted to Bram that still has me a little suspicious of his nature. But I don't know, maybe I'm just used to fairies not being trustworthy. But moving on from that, so this book is in first person from Ivy's point of view. But there have been instances in this book where we get like a random chapter from one of the other 5 girls' perspectives that are participating in the competition. I really like those chapters because they really help me to better understand them and their true natures and their true intentions. And I just feel closer to them as a result of those chapters. Or we have gotten perspectives from 3 out of the 5 other girls. And then another thing that keeps me flipping these pages is I really want to know what happened to Ivy's sister when she went missing for those 8 days, and also what bargain she made with the Fairy Queen. And also my heart just really goes out to Ivy because before her sister made the fairy bargain and before she went missing, her and her sister were very close, but now ever since that happened, their relationship hasn't been the same at all, and her sister very much keeps to herself and just seems not all there. And yeah, so those are all my thoughts so far on this book. And I am now gonna go read some more of this because I have to go to work later on today, but I still have a little bit more time, so I am gonna go read. It's now Tuesday, May 20th, and I just finished reading The Rose Bargain. This book was such a ride, especially like the last bit of this. Like, things got crazy and there was a crazy plot twist and there was a revelation about the fairies that just made my jaw drop. And then in the last half of this book, the romance really ramps up. Romance in the final pages of this book is so angsty and so tension filled. Like, if you love angsty, tension filled romances, then you definitely need to read this. I personally love those types of romances, and the things that just happened with the romance towards the end, so good. Like, some of the things that happened in the romance near the end made me tear up. And then another thing I really loved about this book is just like the relationship and the sense of friendship that forms between Ivy and the other girls that are in the competition. It's like, yes, they have times where they fight and where they're at each other's throats, but also like by the end of it, they're truly friends and they have each other's backs, and that's just so heartwarming. And this book is the first book in a duology, so you bet it ended on a cliffhanger, and I'll definitely be reading the next book. And so this was a 5-star read. So yeah, those are all my thoughts on The Rose Bargain, and with that, we come to the end of this video. Let me know down below if you read either The Rose Bargain or The Notorious Virtues. Let me know what you thought of them. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!